In the hands of a very clever prosecutor, cases like this sometimes come down to a very simple question. And that question is not, did the defendant do it? That question is, who else could have done it? A Connecticut man walks free for a high school fight turned deadly stabbing committed at the age of 16. Plus, 10 years after the disappearance of a Kentucky mother of 5, her killer finally sees justice. And a Colorado dentist heads to trial for the poisoning murder of his wife, and attempting to plant evidence, and attempting to murder the detective. All this and more, this week on Courtroom Confidential. A couple of very surprising verdicts in cases that we have been following closely, one for an acquittal and another for guilty. We're recording this episode on Friday, July 11th, 2025, and this is your Courtroom Confidential weekly roundup. Let's jump in. After 2 days of deliberations, a Connecticut jury found Raul Valle not guilty Wednesday of murder and manslaughter in the death of James Jimmy McGrath, as well as assault charges in connection with the 4 stabbings at a 2022 high school party. A mistrial was declared for the lesser charges in which the jury could not reach a verdict. Valle, who was 16 at the time and a student at St. Joseph High School, admitted to stabbing 4 teens, James McGrath, Ryan Hines, Faison Teal, and Thomas Connery, during the altercation. Now 20, he had faced up to 105 years in prison if convicted on all original counts. He previously rejected a 40-year plea deal, opting to take the case to trial. Over the 9 days of testimony, jurors heard from 26 witnesses, including Valle himself. Valle told the jury he was terrified, surrounded, and believed the knife was the only thing that was going to save me. During closing arguments, his attorney argued it was an act of self-defense after being mobbed. Quote, "That knife was a tool," Kevin Smith said, "the only tool he had available to survive that night." Prosecutor Mark Durso countered that Valle had deliberately re-engaged. He went into the fight already armed, he told jurors. Afterwards, James McGrath's father told reporters, "I'm shocked right now at the verdict. I'm just in shock that an innocent young man with a brilliant potential is not with us anymore, and the person that took his life is right now free tonight." What's happening here? Self-defense cases under these circumstances have to be one of the most difficult types of cases that jurors are ever going to have to consider. You have what I think could accurately be described as mutual combat. You have people involved in a fight who are, to some extent, assuming risks involved in that fight. In other words, the victims in this case, I don't think can be categorized as completely uninvolved or completely innocent. And you have no clear instigator as to what led to the ultimate deadly actions by the defendant in this case. Now, as difficult as that is, and as hard as that might be for jurors to wrap their heads around, in my view, what really persuaded jurors in this case was the testimony of the defendant himself. Defense Lawyering 101 says, never put your client on the stand. Only in the most rare and extreme of circumstances should you ever allow your client to testify. And in most cases where you're doing that, it's a Hail Mary. It's your last option. It's you are losing and you have no other choice but to try to put your client up there and see if he can't convince 1, 2 of them to see it his way. But in this case, it was more than a long shot. In fact, I believe it was necessary. Self-defense is all about reasonableness, reasonable perception of a threat by the defendant, reasonable belief that force had to be used, reasonable use of force. Again and again, the concept of reasonableness needs to be driven home to the jury. Well, who is better positioned to explain that? What the defendant was thinking, what the surrounding circumstances dictated, but the defendant himself. And there's something more than that. More than painting a picture for jurors, more than giving them an understanding of the chaos, of what was going on, of the fear that he felt, of the lack of any other alternative that he may have had in his mind. It's the idea of how powerful the defendant's words can be, whether that is during an interrogation that's recorded, whether that's during even surreptitious recordings of the defendant, but especially when the defendant takes the stand. Despite all of the evidence in this case, and there was a considerable amount of evidence that the prosecution was able to provide. Video and eyewitnesses, several people testified as to what took place that day. Despite all of that, in my view, you can put all of that aside because it came down to those moments when the defendant took the stand, the words that came out of his mouth. If he was able to convince jurors to believe him, to believe the reasonableness of his story, to believe the reasonableness of his actions, then there really isn't any other verdict they could return here. But if they don't believe him, if the defense takes that gamble and they find him to be even the slightest bit not entirely trustworthy, not entirely forthcoming with all of the truthfulness that he should in this case, then that might be enough for jurors to hang their hat on to bring back a guilty verdict. Well, obviously, in this case, they did believe him. They did believe that he was reasonable. They did believe that he was in fear. And in that circumstance, hearing from the defendant, there really is only one acceptable verdict to return. This case is a tragedy. Any way you look at it, there's no reason why a young person's life should be lost under these circumstances. And that is why I say it's some of the most difficult cases for jurors to understand, because a self-defense is a defense that walks the defendant out the door. You've heard that father's statement. He cannot wrap his mind around this. The idea that his son is gone forever, and now the young man that he believes responsible and is responsible, but not legally culpable for his death, is going to go home a free man. The jurors were able to put their emotions aside and follow the law. And that is sometimes a very difficult thing to do. But what do you guys think? Do you think this was the right outcome? Please let us know in the comments. After 10 days of proceedings and roughly 4 hours of deliberations, a Kentucky jury convicted Brooks Houck of murder in the death of his girlfriend, Crystal Rogers, who vanished 10 years ago. Joseph Lawson, Houck's former employee's son, was also found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. Though Rogers' body has never been found, prosecutors said Houck led a plot to kill the 35-year-old mother of 5 and make it look like she left on her own. In a case with several challenges, prosecutors never even offered a motive, instead highlighting that the relationship between Houck and Rogers faced difficulties. The prosecution argued Houck lured Rogers to his family farm on the evening of July 3rd, 2015, claiming they were going on a surprise date. This was premeditated murder, prosecutor Shane Young told jurors. They planned to kill her, to get rid of her, and make it look like she just left. During closing arguments, Houck's defense attorney said a witch hunt for a conviction of Houck prompted investigators to coerce much of the prosecution's most valuable testimony. The whole case is garbage, defense attorney Brian Butler said. They're just throwing stuff against the wall. In May, Lawson's father, Steve Lawson, was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence in a separate trial connected to the disappearance. The elder Lawson admitted to picking up his son from the side of Bluegrass Parkway, where Rogers' abandoned vehicle was found, and calling Houck to tell him the job of moving the car was done. During sentencing immediately following the conviction, one of Rogers' daughters, Kylie Fenwick, who was 14 years old when her mother disappeared, testified, "I've waited a long time for this. I just want you all to be fair and go with what's in your heart." The jury recommended a life sentence for Houck, plus an additional 5-year sentence for the tampering charge to be served consecutively, and 25 years for Lawson, with final sentencing set for August 21st. What's happening here? This case is about as difficult as it can possibly get for prosecutors. First of all, it's a cold case. It's 10 years old. You have no forensic evidence. You have no DNA evidence. You have no eyewitnesses. You have no delayed confession, no rock solid motive, and you have no body. So how in the world were they able to convince jurors under these circumstances, against all these odds, of the guilt of these two men? Well, in the hands of a very clever prosecutor, cases like this sometimes come down to a very simple question. And that question is not, did the defendant do it? That question is, who else could have done it? She's a mother of 5. She vanishes, no clear enemies, and the last person on earth to see her that we know of is the defendant. Who else could have done it? Sometimes when we say a case is all about circumstantial evidence, it is exactly that. the circumstances. Under these circumstances, who could have taken this woman's life? When the question becomes simpler, sometimes so does the answer. But what do you guys think? Do you think that the jury got it right in this case? Please let us know in the comments. Jury selection began Thursday in the murder trial of former Colorado dentist James Craig, more than 2 years after his wife, Angela Craig, was fatally poisoned by lethal doses of cyanide and tetrahydrozoline, a decongestant found in over-the-counter eye drops. Craig now faces a first-degree murder charge in connection with Angela's death, but while in jail, he continues to rack up additional charges in the case. In total, Craig now faces 6 charges: 2 counts of solicitation to commit tampering with physical evidence, 2 counts of solicitation to commit perjury in the first degree, and 1 count of solicitation to commit murder in the first degree. The solicitation for murder charges stems from allegations that he attempted to have a fellow inmate kill a detective investigating his murder case. His defense team has also suffered dramatic turns. Twice, defense attorneys have removed themselves from this case just as the trial was scheduled to begin. Attorney Harvey Steinberg withdrew from the case just before jury selection was scheduled to begin in the trial set in November of 2024, which delayed the trial to this year. Steinberg cited 2 rules of professional conduct as an explanation for his sudden departure. First, his client was persisting in a course of action that he believed to be criminal or fraudulent. And second, his client was insisting on action with which he fundamentally disagreed. And just last week, attorney Robert Working withdrew as defense counsel on the case after he was arrested for arson. 52-page arrest affidavit for James detailed how his wife had fallen ill several times in March 2023 before being hospitalized and ultimately pronounced brain dead on March 18th. But doctors could not determine what was causing her symptoms. The nurse was tipped off that she may have been poisoned by James, which launched the investigation. Police seized computers during a search of James' dental office and found a user had searched for terms like how many grams of pure arsenic will kill a human, and watched videos about making poison, including top 5 undetectable poisons that show no sign of foul play. Detectives also found messages, including travel plans, with a woman that were intimate in nature and contained sexually explicit conversations, according to the affidavit. The person told authorities they knew James had made protein shakes for his wife when they exercised and that she had felt faint and dizzy after drinking them. Police said in the affidavit that they believed the poison was in those shakes. Opening statements are expected early next week, and the trial is slated to run through August 1st. What's happening here? What isn't happening here? Was this case ever winnable for the defense? Probably not. You're talking about a case with very strong circumstantial evidence. First of all, you've got motive for sure. Marital problems, an affair taking place, financial problems. He was apparently over $2 million in debt at the time of his wife's murder. You've got prior bad acts. There's evidence that he had drugged her in the past. You've got access to the poison, the murder weapon itself. And then you've got these Google searches that always fascinate me, that someone feels in this day and age they can sit down at a computer and type these things in and that not cause them trouble. But even with all of that, what I think will seal his fate more than anything else is all of his, shall we call it, busy work since he's been in jail. Attempts to plant evidence. He apparently had promised another inmate free dental work if he would help plant a letter in his garage that appeared to be a letter from his dead wife talking about having suicidal ideations. Attempting to plan the murder of the detective investigating him for the murder of his wife. Jurors in cases like this may have questions. Jurors may have lingering doubts. It is a circumstantial case after all. But when the defendant screams his own guilt through his actions in ways like this after his arrest, all those doubts and all those questions are easily answered. One last thing on this. What creates a man like this? What turns someone into this? I have no idea. You have a guy with 5 beautiful children, a beautiful and loving wife, a life that many people would envy, and he throws it all away, causing death, and irreparable harm to his loved ones. Selfishness does not seem like the right word to use here. But what do you guys think? Is there something I'm missing in this case? Please let us know in the comments. Is there someone you know who might be interested in these cases? Then please share this video with them. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to like and subscribe now. It's an easy and free way to support the show and make sure you don't miss an episode. And don't miss out on our Courtroom Confidential podcast. You'll find our exclusive True Crime Minute series and more on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Also making headlines, a federal hearing to discuss moving up the sentencing for a hip-hop mogul was abruptly adjourned Tuesday without arguments or a new date being set. Though Sean Diddy Combs' defense attorneys initially pushed for an earlier date, both sides ultimately agreed to the judge's original proposal of October 3rd, which is now officially on the docket. It was not immediately clear why the defense apparently abandoned, at least for now, their attempt to secure expedited sentencing for Combs. Combs was acquitted last week of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, but convicted on 2 counts of prostitution-related charges. His defense team had cited exceptional circumstances, including the 2018 death of Kim Porter, the mother of his children, as grounds for expedited sentencing. Prosecutors opposed the request, arguing Combs deserved the standard process, including a pre-sentencing report from probation officials that would require Combs to sit for an interview. Quote, "The only thing exceptional about this defendant are his wealth, his violence, and his brazenness," Prosecutor Maureen Comey said. She also said that the government plans to pursue significant incarceration for Combs on the prostitution charges. Combs faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison on the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, though it's possible he will receive less than that for a first-time conviction. Any sentence would include credit for his time served, which so far totals roughly 10 months. Combs' split verdict last week followed 6 weeks of testimony that saw the prosecution present 34 witnesses and the defense present none. The jury of 8 men and 4 women deliberated just over 2 days before reaching their decision. The former Ohio defense attorney who has been charged in connection with his client's 2013 stabbing death was back in court on Wednesday for a pretrial conference. Judge Kira Krivosh ordered Gregory Moore to be placed on court-supervised release with GPS monitoring. He's barred from out-of-state travel and firearm possession, and any violations could result in arrest without bond. Moore faces multiple charges, including aggravated murder, conspiracy, 6 counts of murder, and 2 counts of kidnapping in relation to the death of his client, Eliza Sherman. Sherman, a 53-year-old mother of 4 and Cleveland Clinic nurse, was brutally stabbed in downtown Cleveland in broad daylight. Prosecutors say Moore lured Sherman to his office under false pretenses as part of a kidnapping plot to avoid proceeding to trial on her divorce case. A masked individual, alleged to be Moore or an accomplice, then stabbed Sherman over 10 times. Moore's defense team denies the narrative. "You have an innocent man charged with a crime that could take away his life for the rest of it and all of his freedom," said defense attorney John Paul Ryan. The courtroom was packed with Sherman's family and friends on Wednesday. "He has to know how much people loved her and will support her until justice is done. And I will personally never give up until justice is done," said Maria Zuhl. "I'd like to see him behind bars forever." Moore's next pretrial hearing will be held on July 30th. The attorney acting as a victim advocate in the case of a Utah mother charged in the fatal poisoning of her husband is challenging a defense subpoena seeking communications with the victim's family and prosecutors. Kouri Richins was arrested and charged with Eric Richins' murder in May 2023 after Eric died of a fentanyl overdose in 2022. Following his death, Kouri Richins wrote a children's book about grieving. In a July 8th court petition, attorney Greg Skordas argues these records are protected by victim advocate privilege and not related to the pending trial. Court documents also claim the defense wants copies of the lawyer's retainer agreement and checks payable to him from Eric Richins' family. He says he has no formal retainer agreement and is working pro bono as a spokesperson for the family. The subpoena also requests 3 years' worth of messages with prosecutors and specific investigators. Communications, he says, are either unrelated or non-existent. Skordas says it's unduly burdensome to produce 3 years and 3 months of communications. He has asked Judge Richard Mrazek to sanction Kathy Nestor, the defense attorney who served him, and schedule a hearing. The court has yet to rule on the matter. A pretrial hearing was held on Tuesday in the case of the Connecticut stepmother accused of imprisoning, torturing, and starving her stepson for over 2 decades. Kimberly Sullivan did not appear in court Tuesday, but her attorney, Ioannis Kaloudis, pressed for access to the victim's medical records, calling them critical to the case. Sullivan is accused of starving her stepson and holding him captive for 20 years. The 32-year-old victim was discovered in February weighing just 68 pounds, according to police, but the defense argued the state has yet to provide key medical records to verify that claim. The victim, in order to have some privacy and freedom, has changed his name. The state said his new name is on the medical records, and to protect him, the state does not want the new name released and needs time to redact it from the records. We think that's wrong on a number of different levels, added Attorney Kaloudis, saying all information should be made available. Kaloudis said he had received much of the discovery already, including police reports, body camera footage, and interviews, but maintains he has not seen evidence to support the prosecution's most serious claims. There's a claim that he was starved, he told reporters, near death. We've heard about the Holocaust. I haven't seen anything to support that. If those are the claims they're making at trial, we'd like to see it. The victim's biological mother, Tracy Vallerand, attended the hearing. She claims she's written letters to her son but hasn't heard back. He's 32 years old. 32, think about that, expressed Vallerand. And he hasn't seen a classroom since the 4th grade. The prosecution and judge confirmed Sullivan is required to appear in court on August 19th. A woman in Victoria, Australia, has been found guilty of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder after serving a beef Wellington lunch laced with death cap mushrooms in July of 2023. The jury returned the verdict following a 10-week trial and 6 days of deliberations in Morwell, a town near where the poisoning occurred. Erin Patterson was accused of deliberately tainting the lunch with death cap mushrooms, highly toxic fungi containing toxins that prevent the production of proteins in liver cells, leading to cell death and possible liver failure in about 2 days after ingestion. The victims, her parents-in-law, Dawn and Gail Patterson, and Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, died days after the meal. Heather's husband, Ian Wilkinson, survived after weeks in the hospital. Patterson claimed the poisonings were a terrible accident and that she repeatedly lied to police out of panic when she realized she may have added foraged mushrooms to the dish. But prosecutors argued she deliberately picked the lethal fungi after seeing their location on the Citizen Science iNaturalist website and secretly prepared the meal using a food dehydrator later found at a waste recycling center with her fingerprints and mushroom residue. Prosecutor Nanette Rogers, SC, laid out 4 calculated deceptions. First, a fabricated cancer claim she used as a pretense for hosting the lunch. Second, the lethal doses of poisons she laced in the home-cooked beef Wellingtons. Third, her attempts to make it seem that she also suffered death cap mushroom poisoning. And fourth, the sustained cover-up she embarked upon to conceal the truth. The court also heard Facebook messages sent in December of 2022 where Patterson had expressed anger and frustration over Dawn and Gail's reluctance to get involved in their son's marriage breakdown. "I'm sick of this, S. I want nothing to do with them," she wrote. "I thought his parents would want him to do the right thing, but it seems their concern about not wanting to feel uncomfortable and not wanting to get involved in their son's personal matters are overriding that, so F 'em." Patterson's defense lawyer, Colin Mandy, SC, accused the prosecution of being selective with the evidence and pushing 4 ridiculous, convoluted propositions. During 8 days of testimony, Patterson pleaded her innocence, claiming she inadvertently added foraged mushrooms to the meal. Despite the defense arguing a lack of motive, the jury concluded the accused intended to kill all 4 guests. Under Australian law, none of the jurors can be publicly identified, and they're prohibited from disclosing jury room deliberations even after the trial ends. Patterson will be sentenced at a later date to be determined. An Oklahoma pediatrician is facing a first-degree murder charge in Florida after police say she killed her 4-year-old daughter and then staged the scene to look like a drowning. Dr. Neha Gupta was arrested in Oklahoma on July 1st, waived extradition before a judge on Thursday, and will be extradited to Miami to face charges. The child, Aria Talathi, was found unresponsive in a pool at a short-term rental home in El Portal, Florida, on June 27th. She was pronounced dead at the hospital. Gupta initially told officers that Aria accidentally drowned when she slipped out of bed during the night. but an autopsy revealed no water in her lungs or stomach and signs of trauma consistent with smothering, not drowning. Investigators determined that Gupta had traveled with her daughter from Oklahoma City and the two were staying at the rental. Gupta was in a contentious 2-year-long divorce with the child's father. In 2024, judges denied the mother's request to pursue sole custody and ordered her to pay her ex-husband over $79,000 in attorney's fees. When officers spoke to him, he said he didn't know that his daughter had been taken out of state. We are disappointed that the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office succumbed to pressure and rushed to judgment, Gupta's attorney Richard Cooper said in a statement. As a result, a grieving mother who just lost her daughter is in jail. We look forward to a full investigation which will uncover the truth of the matter. Gupta has since lost her job as a pediatrician at Oklahoma's Children's Hospital. Before we get to what's coming up for next week, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for being a part of this growing community. But I want to give a very special shout out to Sneemac for their thoughtful comment on Spotify and to our CC crew members, Marie Lamendez 3705 and Anne Enrique for your support over on YouTube. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. Please keep those reviews coming. We appreciate your help in spreading the word about Courtroom Confidential. On the docket for next week, Bianca Ellis, the Ohio woman accused of fatally stabbing a 3-year-old in a grocery store parking lot in 2024, will return to court Monday, July 14th for a pretrial conference. Brian Walsh, the Massachusetts man accused of killing and dismembering his wife, Anna Walsh, will be back in court for a non-evidentiary hearing on suppression Monday, July 14th. Accused Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann will return to court on Thursday, July 17th, as the judge continues to weigh whether to allow key DNA evidence in the trial. And finally, please join us this Sunday for our special question and answer series, Sunday Fun Day. All are invited to leave us a voice message at thecourtroomconfidential.com, which I will answer live during tomorrow's show at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. You can find the live stream on YouTube, X, and Facebook. And that is it for us this week, folks. I am your host, Josh Ritter. You can find us on social media at CR Confidential on X, at The Courtroom Confidential on Instagram, or at thecourtroomconfidential.com. Thank you again for joining me. Have a great weekend, and I will see you again next week for another episode of Courtroom Confidential.